Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week we return to the land of Earl for the next part of The King of Elflands' Daughter. The audio that we're using has been released into the public domain by Michelle Fry through the LibriVox project. Thanks again to Michelle and all the LibriVoxers. We spend a lot of time with the King of Elfland in the next couple of chapters. Here we discover that he's quite like the fairies in Ars Magica. The king is, in a very real sense, his land.
Chapter 6. The Rune of the Elf King. On the high balcony of his gleaming tower, the King of Elfland stood. Below him echoed yet the 1,000 steps. He had lifted his head to chant the rune that should hold his daughter in Elfland, and in that moment had seen her pass the murky barrier, which on this side, facing toward Elfland, is all lustrous with twilight, and on that side, facing towards the fields we know, is smoky and angry and dull. And now he had dropped his head till his beard lay mingled with his cape of ermine above his cerulean cloak, and stood there silently sorrowful, while time passed swift as ever over the fields we know.
In the 1300s, Edward III restricted ermine-wearing in England to the royal family. Later it spread out a little more. The placement of the black dots, which are the tips of the tails of the ermines, could be read to tell a person's status. Ermines are stoats, a kind of mustelid related to weasels and ferrets. In summer they have chestnut-coloured coats, but they have a white winter coat, and that's what's desired by furriers. There's a myth that the ermine would rather die than soil his coat, which is an allegory for moral purity. For Magonomia, it reminds me of one of the networks of intelligences, where "I'll die before I damage my impeccable clothes" seems an entirely plausible sort of credo. I may have to name one of the handlers in that group the ermine. Actually, there are ermine variants, so the leaders could be the ermine, the counter-ermine, the erminoir, and the peen, with an enforcer who may or may not exist, called the erminites. We have discussed the history of cerulean blue in the Venice episode on the election of the first Doge. That was episode 271.
And standing there all blue and white against his silver tower, aged by the passing of times of which we know nothing before he imposed its eternal calm upon Elfland, he thought of his daughter amongst our pitiless years. For he knew, whose wisdom surpassed the confines of Elfland and touched our rugged fields, knew well the harshness of material things and all the turmoil of time. Even as he stood there, he knew that the years that assail beauty and the myriad harshnesses that vex the spirit were already about his daughter. And the days that remained to her now seemed scarce more to him, dwelling beyond the fret and ruin of time, than to us might seem a briar rose's hours when plucked and foolishly hawked in the streets of a city. He knew that there hung over her now the doom of all mortal things. He thought of her perishing soon, as mortal things must, to be buried amongst the rocks of a land that scorned Elfland, and that held its most treasured myths to be of little account. And were he not the king of all that magical land, which held its eternal calm from his own mysterious serenity, he had wept to think of the grave in rocky earth, gripping that form that was so fair forever.
So he chooses not to weep because his emotional state is reflected through the realm, and he doesn't want to inflict it on his subject.
Or else, he thought, she would pass to some paradise far from his knowledge, some heaven of which books told in the fields we know, for he had heard even of this. He pictured her on some apple-haunted hill, under blossoms of an everlasting April, through which flickered the pale gold halos of those that had cursed Elfland. He saw, though dimly for all his magical wisdom, the glory that only the blessed clearly see. He saw his daughter on those heavenly hills stretch out both arms, as he knew well she would, towards the pale blue peaks of her elfin home, while never one of the blessed heeded her yearning. And then, though he was king of all that land that had its everlasting calm from him, he wept, and all Elfland shivered. It shivered as placid water shivers here if something suddenly touches it from our fields.
In Ars Magica terms, this is a change in the temper of the aura, and it can be felt by anyone attuned to that aura.
Then the king turned and left his balcony, and went in great haste down his brazen steps. He came clanging to the ivory doors that shut the tower below, and through them came to the throne room of which only song may tell. And there he took a parchment out of a coffer, and a plume from some fabulous wing, and dipping the plume into no earthly ink, wrote out a rune on the parchment. Then raising 2 fingers, he made the minor enchantment, whereby he summoned his guard. And no guard came. I have said that no time passed at all in Elfland, yet the happening of events is in itself a manifestation of time, and no event can occur unless time pass. Now it is thus with time in Elfland. In the eternal beauty that dreams in that honeyed air, nothing stirs or fades or dies, nothing seeks its happiness in movement or change or a new thing, but has its ecstasy in the perpetual contemplation of all the beauty that has ever been, and which always glows over those enchanted lawns, as intense as when first created by incantation or song. Yet if the energies of the wizard's mind arose to meet a new thing, then that power that had laid its calm upon Elfland and held back time, troubled the calm a while, and time for a while shook Elfland.
Much as in Ars Magica, there is some question of if fairies do anything at all when humans are not watching them, so when the king is calm, time does not pass. In Elfland, it doesn't need to, because there is nothing happening.
Cast anything into a deep pool from a land strange to it, where some great fish dreams, and green weeds dream, and heavy colors dream, and light sleeps. The great fish stirs, the colors shift and change, the green weeds tremble, and light wakes. A myriad things know slow movement and change, and soon the whole pool is still again. It was the same when Alvaric passed through the border of twilight and right through the enchanted wood, and the king was troubled and moved, and all Elfland trembled.
So Alberic brings time by bringing change. That also means he activates spell durations.
When the king saw that no guard came, he looked into the wood, which he knew to be troubled, through the deep mass of the trees that were quivering yet with the coming of Alvaric. He looked through the deeps of the wood and the silver walls of his palace, for he looked by enchantment, and there he saw the 4 knights of his guard lying stricken upon the ground, with their thick elvish blood hanging out through slits in their armor. And he thought of the early magic whereby he had made the eldest, with a rune all newly inspired, before he had conquered time. He passed out through the splendor and glow of one of his flashing portals, and over a gleaming lawn, and came to the fallen guard, and saw the trees still troubled. "There has been magic here," said the king of Elfland. And then, though he only had 3 runes that could do such a thing, and though they only could be uttered once, and one was already written upon parchment to bring his daughter home, he uttered the 2nd of his most magical runes over that elder knight that his magic had made long ago. And in the silence that followed the last words of the rune, the rents in the moon-bright armor all clicked shut at once, and the thick dark blood was gone, and the knight rose live to his feet. And the elf king now had only 1 rune left that was mightier than any magic we know.
A mortal king would just hire another guard. It seems that the creations of the elf king are, in a very real sense, an extension of himself, and so losing his first guard is losing a piece of himself that he needs to restore.
The other 3 knights lay dead, and having no souls, their magic returned again to the mind of their master.
So, in Ars Magica terms, he has a might pool which is diminished by his actions until the spells expire, when the might that is invested in them returns to his pool.
He went back then to his palace, while he sent the last of his guard to fetch him a troll. Dark brown of skin and 2 or 3 feet high, the trolls are a gnomish tribe that inhabit Elfland. And soon there was a scamper in the throne room that may only be told of in song, and the Troll lit by the throne on its 2 bare feet and stood before its king. The king gave it the parchment with the rune written thereon, saying, "Scamper hence, and pass over the end of the land until you come to the fields that none know here, and find the Princess Lirazel, who is gone to the haunts of men, and give her this rune, and she shall read it, and all shall be well." And the Troll scampered thence.
Note that any troll would do. This is not the most cunning troll, or the one that knows the fields of humans best. Perhaps the rune's so powerful it cannot help but be delivered. Starts for the troll eventually. Note he's a short creature that scampers and moves in great leaps, not a troll in the traditional role-playing sense.
And soon the Troll was come with long leaps to the frontier of twilight. Then nothing moved in Elfland any more, and motionless on that splendid throne of which only song may speak, sat the old king, mourning in silence.
So time once again stops in Elfland when there is no action to occur.
Chapter 7. The Coming of the Troll. When the Troll came to the frontier of twilight, he skipped nimbly through, yet he emerged cautiously into the fields we know, for he was afraid of dogs. Slipping quietly out of those dense masses of twilight, he came so softly into our fields that no eye had seen him unless it were gazing already at the spot at which he appeared. There he paused for some instants, looking to left and right, and seeing no dogs, he left the barrier of twilight. This Troll had never before been in the fields we know, yet he knew well to avoid dogs, for the fear of dogs is so deep and universal amongst all that are less than man, that it seems to have passed even beyond our boundaries, and to have been felt in Elfland.
So this is a sovereign ward.
In our fields it was now May, and the buttercups stretched away before the Troll, a world of yellow mingled with the brown of the budding grasses. When he saw so many buttercups shining there, the wealth of earth astonished him, and soon he was moving through them, yellowing his shins as he went.
This gives us a hint as to his height. Being an Australian, the plants I call buttercups are completely different from the ones Lord Dunsany is talking about, and so I thought that the Troll was far taller than he actually is.
He had not gone far from Elfland when he met with a hare, who was lying in a comfortable arrangement of grass, in which he had intended to pass the time till he should have things to see to. When the hare saw the Troll, he sat there without any movement whatever, and without any expression in his eyes, and did nothing at all but think. When the Troll saw the hare, he skipped nearer, and lay down before it in the buttercups, and asked it the way to the haunts of men. And the hare went on thinking. "Thing of these fields?" repeated the Troll. "Where are the haunts of men?" The hare got up then and walked towards the Troll, which made the hare look very ridiculous, for he had none of the grace while walking that he has when he runs or gambols, and was much lower in front than behind. He put his nose into the Troll's face and twitched foolish whiskers. "Tell me the way," said the Troll. When the hare perceived that the Troll did not smell of anything like dog, he was content to let the Troll question him. But he did not understand the language of Elfland, so he lay still again and thought while the Troll talked.
It's odd that everything knows the language of Elfland except this hare, who, as we have said, is of a species commonly associated with witches. Does this indicate magic resistance, protecting against the communicative glamour?
And at last the Troll wearied of getting no answer, so he leaped up and shouted, "Dogs!" and left the hare and scampered away merrily over the buttercups, taking any direction that led away from Elfland. And though the hare could not quite understand Elvish language, yet there was a vehemence in the tone in which the Troll had shouted "dogs," which caused apprehension to enter the thoughts of the hare, so that very soon he forsook his arrangement of grass and lolloped away through the meadow with one scornful look after the Troll, but he did not go very fast, going mostly on 3 legs, with one hind leg all ready to let down if there should really be dogs. And soon he paused and sat up and put up his ears and looked across the buttercups and thought deeply. And before the hare had ceased to ponder the troll's meaning, the troll was far out of sight and had forgotten what he had said. And soon he saw the gables of a farmhouse rise up beyond a hedge. They seemed to look at him with little windows up under red tiles. "A haunt of man," said the troll, and yet some elvish instinct seemed to tell him that it was not here that Princess Florizel had come.
He apparently has a version of the fairy power Hound. How he gets through Lyrazel's resistance is unclear. Possibly it has something to do with the penetration bonus due to the rune.
Still, he went nearer the farm and began to gaze at its poultry. But just at that moment a dog saw him, one that had never seen a troll before, and it uttered one canine cry of astonished indignation, and, keeping all the rest of its breath for the chase, sped after the troll. The troll began at once to rise and dip over the buttercups as though he had almost borrowed its speed from the swallow and were riding the lower air. Such speed was new to the dog, and he went in a long curve after the troll, leaning over as he went, his mouth open and silent, the wind rippling all the way from his nose to his tail in one wavy current. The curve was made by the dog's baffled hopes to catch the troll as he slanted across. Soon he was straight behind, and the troll toyed with speed, breathing the flowery air in long fresh draughts above the tops of the buttercups. He thought no more of the dog, but he did not cease in the flight that the dog had caused because of the joy of the speed. And this strange chase continued over those fields, the troll driven on by joy and the dog by duty. For the sake of novelty, then, the troll put his feet together as he leaped over the flowers, and alighting with rigid knees, fell forwards on his hands, and so turned over, and straightening his elbows suddenly as he turned, shot himself into the air, still turning over and over. He did this several times, increasing the indignation of the dog, who knew well enough that that was no way to go over the fields we know. But for all his indignation, the dog had seen clear enough that he would never catch that troll, and presently he returned to the farm, and found his master there, and went up to him wagging his tail. So hard he wagged it that the farmer was sure he had done some useful thing, and patted him, and there the matter ended.
The troll moves so fast that he almost flies. Remember that winged fairies are essentially a Victorian invention.
And it was well enough for the farmer that his dog had chased that troll from his farm, for had it communicated to his livestock any of the wonder of Elfland, they would have mocked at man, and that farmer would have lost the allegiance of all but his staunch dog.
Glamour is, then, mildly infectious.
And the troll went on gaily over the tips of the buttercups. Presently he saw rising up all white over the flowers a fox that was facing him with his white chest and chin, and watching the troll as it went. The troll went near to him and took a look, and the fox went on watching him, for the fox watches all things. He had come back lately to those dewy fields from slinking by night along the boundary of twilight that lies between here and Elfland. He even prowls inside the very boundary, walking amongst the twilight, and it is in the mystery of that heavy twilight that lies between here and there that there clings to him some of the glamour that he brings with him to our fields. "Well, no man's dog," said the troll, for they know the fox in Elfland from seeing him often go dimly along their borders, and this is the name they give him.
The fox knows the borders of Faerie, handy for a Bjorna Magus. Foxes, of course, are tricksy creatures in European folklore. They are a little less well-intentioned than the hare and the spider, who have a similar job.
"Well, thing over the border," said the fox when he answered at all, for he knew troll talk. "Are there haunts of men near here?" said the troll. The fox moved his whiskers by slightly wrinkling his lip. Like all liars, he reflected before he spoke, and sometimes even let wise silences do better than speech. "Men live here and men live there," said the fox. "I want their haunts," said the troll. "What for?" said the fox. "I have a message from the king of Elfland." The fox showed no respect or fear at the mention of that dread name, but slightly moved his head and eyes to conceal the awe that he felt. "If it is a message," he said, "their haunts are over there." And he pointed with his long thin nose towards Earl. "How shall I know when I get there?" said the Troll. "By the smell," said the Fox. "It is a big haunt of men, and the smell is dreadful." "Thanks, no man's dog," said the Troll, and he seldom thanked anyone. "I should never go near them," said the Fox, "but for—" and he paused and reflected silently. "But for what?" said the Troll. "But for their poultry," and he fell into a grave silence. "Goodbye, no man's dog," said the Troll, and turned head over heels, and was off on his way to Earl. Passing over the buttercups all through the dewy morning, the Troll was far on his way by the afternoon, and saw before evening the smoke and the towers of Earl. It was all sunk in a hollow, and gables and chimneys and towers peered over the lip of the valley, and smoke hung over them on the dreamy air. "The haunts of men," said the Troll. Then he sat down amongst the grasses and looked at it. Presently he went nearer and looked at it again. He did not like the look of the smoke and that crowd of gables. Certainly it smelt dreadfully. There had been some legend in Elfland of the wisdom of man, and whatever respect that legend had gained for us in the light mind of a Troll, now all blew lightly away as he looked at the crowded houses. And as he looked at them there passed a child of 4, a small girl on a footpath over the fields, going home in the evening to Earl. They looked at each other with round eyes. "Hello," said the child. "Hello, child of men," said the Troll. He was not speaking Troll talk now, but the language of Elfland, that grander tongue that he had had to speak when he was before the king, for he knew the language of Elfland, although it was never used in the homes of the Trolls, who preferred Troll talk. This language was spoken in those days also by men, for there were fewer languages then, and the elves and the people of Earl both used the same.
This is an interesting development. Is it before Babel?
"What are you?" said the child. "A Troll of Elfland," answered the Troll. "So I thought," said the child. "Where are you going, child of men?" the Troll asked. "To the houses," the child replied. "We don't want to go there," said the Troll. "No," said the child. "Come to Elfland," said the Troll. The child thought for a while. Other children had gone, and the elves always sent a changeling in their place, so that nobody quite missed them, and nobody really knew. She thought a while of the wonder and wildness of Elfland, and then of her own home. "No," said the child. "Why not?" said the Troll. "Mother made a jam roll this morning," said the child, and she walked on gravely home. Had it not been for that chance jam roll, she had gone to Elfland.
Bill Bryson has a lovely line in one of his books about how the English are the only people to put jam into things to make them really special, and how he loves them for it. That being said, jam roll is rather nice, and fairy is, technically speaking, always there.
"Jam," said the Troll contemptuously, and thought of the tarns of Elfland, the great lily leaves lying flat upon their solemn waters, the huge blue lilies towering into the elf light above the green deep tarns. For jam this child had forsaken them? Then he thought of his duty again, the roll of parchment and the elf king's rune for his daughter. He had carried the parchment in his left hand when he ran, in his mouth when he somersaulted over the buttercups. Was the princess here, he thought, or were there other haunts of men? As evening drew in, he crept nearer and nearer the homes, to hear without being seen. End of Chapter 7. The Coming of the Troll.
Let us return to the jam roll and the mysteries thereto. I doubt this is a modern jam Swiss roll. It's too early. Basically, the modern Swiss roll is a thin sponge coated with an adhesive layer and then rolled. In my part of the world, it is then sometimes baked with a sugar syrup drizzled over it. I presume this is the older jam roly-poly, the evocatively named Dead Man's Arm. The recipe, which I'm about to read and is given in the text in the accompanying post on the blog, is from A Plain Cookery Book for the Working Classes by Charles Elmer Francatelli. Ingredients: 1 pound of flour, 6 ounces of suet, half a pint of water, a pinch of salt, a pound of any common jam at 7d. Mix the flour, suet, water, and salt into a firm, compact kind of paste. Roll this out with a rolling pin. Sprinkle some flour on the table to prevent the paste from sticking to either. Fold up the paste and roll it out again, repeating the rolling out and folding 3 times. This operation will make the paste lighter. Next, roll out the paste 1 foot long by 18 inches wide. Spread the jam all over this. Roll up the pudding in the form of a bolster. Roll it up in a well-greased and floured cloth. Tie it up tightly at both ends. Put the pudding in a pot of boiling water and boil it for nearly 2 hours. When done, turn out carefully onto a dish without breaking the crust. You'll note the only leavening in the pastry here is air mechanically trapped by layering. Suet, for those of you fortunate enough to be unaware of it, I'm sorry, is a sort of spongy animal fat. In modern times you can get a vegan version, which smells less like being forsaken by God. Arguably, this would put little holes in the pastry as some of the fat liquefies and drains out into the boiling water. The pudding is also sometimes called shirt sleeve pudding, as a shirt sleeve makes a perfect pudding cloth for it. From this it also gets the name dead man's arm or dead man's leg. And with that culinary detour, we finish for the week. Your saga may vary.